Hey nerdy knitters, if you're a new or beginner knitter and you want to practice learning some new skills, then these scarf patterns are perfect for you. They're big enough that you can really get in lots of practice. They're easy to modify and adjust the width or the length, and when you're all done, you have a great accessory that you can give as a gift or wear for yourself. We're going to look at 12 patterns today. 6 are fairly basic. Once you know how to knit and purl and cast on, you can tackle any of these. There's even one that will help you learn all of those skills. And there's 6 more that might advance your skills just a little bit once you're beyond those basics and you want to practice some new things. Before we dive in, I just want to say, hey, I'm Tanya here at Nerdy Knitting. I'm a certified knitting instructor and a knitwear designer, and my goal is to help you become confident and adventurous with your knitting. And these 12 scarf patterns will help you do just that. You'll find links for all of these scarves down in the video description box, as well as some timestamp links if you want to jump to any point in the video. First on the list is my beginner scarf. Now this is a full tutorial. There's a full video for this. And the pattern, once you purchase it and download it, it will walk you through each step of the process, from casting on to knitting to purling to reading your stitches to doing some basic increases and decreases with yarn overs and knit two togethers. You'll create some pretty eyelets. All of that's covered in this tutorial. So if you're brand new to knitting and you want to learn all of the basic skills, or if you learned as a child and you want to refresh your memory, then this is the tutorial and the pattern for you. And once you're ready to move on, then you'll want to take a look at these other 5 patterns. First, we have Wheat by Tin Can Knits. Now this one is still basically garter stitch, but there's a section of knit one, purl one, rib in there within that garter stitch background. So you're practicing your basic knit stitch and you're also adding in that purl stitch, and you're working on 2 different basic knitting textures that every knitter should know how to do. Garter stitch, which is knitting back and forth on every row, and then knit and purl that creates a little rib pattern. Now ribs are used in everything from mitten cuffs to hat cuffs to sweater hems and sleeves. You'll be using rib patterns a lot, so this is a great way to get some practice in with that. Now if you don't really like purling and you'd rather skip that, then this scarf is for you, a no purl rib scarf. Yes, you can make a rib pattern without using the purl stitch, and you'll learn how in this pattern. It uses a stitch pattern called Cartridge Belt Rib. It's just a 2-row pattern repeat where you are knitting and slipping stitches. Now the thing you want to be aware of with Cartridge Belt Rib and with slipping stitches is you're slipping them purl-wise. You're going to insert just as if you're going to purl the stitch, but instead of purling it, you're just going to move it over to the right needle. Now that's the only little tip you've got to be aware of when you're working this pattern. Otherwise, you are just knitting and slipping stitches. This Cartridge Belt Rib pattern, if you want to learn more about it, check out this video. But this scarf pattern is perfect for those who really don't want to purl, but they still want that rib look in their scarf. Now, if you prefer color instead of texture, then you'll want to check out the Hogwarts Scarf, which you don't have to be a Harry Potter fan to knit this scarf. Use whatever colors you like and create the stripes as wide or as narrow as you like. You'll be knitting in the round. You'll be switching colors, which is not hard either. You just drop the old color and start knitting with the new one, and you'll be making tassels as well. But this is still a perfect beginner project because you're working in the round and you're knitting every single round. You're creating stockinette stitch. So there's no purling here, and you get those interesting color changes as well. Next on the list is A Good Scarf by Barbara Benson. She's a YouTuber. I'll put a link down to her channel down below in the video description box. And this scarf looks more difficult than it actually is. It's really a pretty simple pattern. It's just garter stitch with sections of slipped stitches to create a bit of interest. So you're knitting every row and you're slipping some stitches every other row. And this pattern produces really interesting result, but it's actually really simple to work. All you need to do is slip those stitches, and like in the other scarf, you're slipping those stitches purl-wise. You're holding your yarn to the back of your work, and then you're inserting your right needle into that first stitch on your left needle, and you're just moving it right over to the right needle without doing anything to it. That is called slipping a stitch, and it's a great way to add some texture and visual interest like you'll see in this scarf from Barbara Benson. And number 6 is the Mistake Rib Scarf from Purl Soho. Mistake Rib is also another interesting texture. It's a rib pattern. It's a 2x2 rib where you knit 2 and you purl 2. But on one of the rows, you are offsetting that pattern by 1 stitch. So you end up with more like a section of rows of stockinette with garter stitch in between, because you've moved that stitch over a little bit and it changes and it disrupts the pattern. It's a really interesting texture, but you're still working just knit 2, purl 2 rib. Now, if you want to learn more just about the stitch pattern mistake stitch rib, I've got a video for that. You'll find a link down below. Now that we've looked at our 6 basic patterns, those are really great patterns that will cover the basics really well. You'll be knitting and purling, creating different textures, using some color. But when you're ready to move on and learn a few new skills that are important for all knitters to know, then these 6 scarves are great options. Number 1 is my saltwater scarf. Now, I made this one with the intention of helping knitters read knitting instructions, and I've got a whole video about that too that goes along with this scarf. But each section of the scarf features a different, very common stitch pattern, but I've written the instructions in a different way for each one, so you can get used to reading different written instructions because every knitting pattern might write things differently. There's no standard way to write knitting instructions for every single pattern. So this scarf pattern will help you get some practice in the different ways that you'll find knitting patterns are written. Next is the ZickZack Scarf by Christy Cam. Now this one, because of the increase and decrease, you'll be working a knit 2 together and a KFB, creates a simple chevron pattern within the garter stitch. You're still knitting every row, but you're adding in those increases and decreases to create the shaping that happens in this pattern. And of course, knit 2 togethers and KFBs are basic knit stitches that every knitter should know how to do. Number 3 in this section is the Fisherman's Rib Scarf from Very Pink Knits. There's also a hat that goes along with it as well if you want to practice working in the round and decreasing the crown shaping for a hat. But this uses Fisherman's Rib, which is also a rib pattern. It's a knit 1, purl 1 pattern, but instead of knitting into a stitch, you are knitting into the stitch below the stitch on your needle, which is a specific technique. You can check out this video here to learn more about that. But by using that technique, you're creating a really squishy textured rib fabric, which is nice and warm, and I just love this texture. If I'm going to do a knit 1, purl 1 rib for a scarf, and I want something simple but still with some more interest in texture, this is my go-to because I just love the way this one feels. It really does feel rich and textured. But the only change is adding this knit 1 below to create that texture, but it's still a basic purl pattern, so it's easy for even beginners to tackle. Number 4 on the list is from Church Mouse Yarns, their linen stitch scarf. Linen stitch is another great fabric. It produces sort of a woven textured look. Linen stitch is just a simple 2-row repeat that involves knitting and purling and slipping stitches. But what happens in this one is that you hold the yarn to the right side of the work all of the time when you're slipping stitches, and it creates this woven textured fabric. And it's a great fabric that has lots of different uses, and as you see, it's used in this scarf here. And if you want to learn more about linen stitch, then I've got a video all about that too. Next is the 1-row repeat scarf by Stephanie Pearl McPhee. It's a great 1-row pattern repeat. You're knitting and purling and also knitting into the back leg of the stitch. So it creates a textured garter-like fabric with rows of twisted stitches, which are created when you knit through the back leg of the stitch. And last on our list is a 1-row lace scarf. If you want to try your hand at lace, this is a great way to do it. It's really simple 1-row repeat and it will produce this scarf. Along with your basics of knitting and purling and casting on and binding off, you'll need to know how to yarn over and knit 2 together. Now, all of these scarves are perfect for beginners. You'll find the links for them down below so you can advance your skills and learn new techniques. And if you need more help, take a look at this playlist I have right here that's filled with tips and things that are perfect for beginner or intermediate knitters. And if you need help learning how to read your stitches, be sure to check out this free guide I have right here.